I'm Jerry Cuttler. I'm from Canada. I worked with Atomic Energy of Canada for 25 and a half years. I've got 50 years experience with nuclear energy and radiation. And well, the purpose of my talk was to talk about the appropriate radiation levels for evacuations, for example, in accidents like the one that happened in Fukushima. There was an enormous fear created when the radioactivity was released, and this is because the public are not aware of what the health effects of radiation are, especially low doses. And so they were paralyzed with psychosis of fear, because from their childhood they've been brought up, educated, informed that radiation is harmful in any dose. And yet the world is immersed in natural radiation, large amounts of it. It's in different concentrations and different levels in various places, but people live in all these places and they don't show any adverse effects, no increase in cancer. So a lot of these fears were created when the bombs went off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the Second World War. And people wanted to stop the arms race that started right after that. And so they created the scare. We'd used radiation prior to that for more than 50 years to treat people with radiation. Both there were beneficial effects from low doses, and they were using higher doses to destroy cancer tumors. And people were using radiation, X-rays, and radiology to do diagnostics, to examine people. So back then we had a threshold that we realized was appropriate, because back then there were cases of overexposures mainly for radiologists, and they realized that you can get a burn from high dose or a long-term effect like early cancer. So they introduced a threshold, a level that you could not exceed, and when they did that, they found that the radiologists were living longer than their other fellows, their other people, medical people working in different areas. And so not only did the threshold control level they put in stop the adverse effects, radiologists were actually seeing a beneficial effect. Well, what happened was, after the bombing and after the war, they created a scare. There were tests that were done many years ago by people like Herman Muller. He tested fruit flies and showed that radiation causes mutations. But they didn't know that our DNA, these cells that are in our chromosomes, that are in our, these molecules, the DNA molecules that are in our chromosomes, that are in our cells, they themselves are unstable, and they're damaged at a very, very high rate just by the oxygen we breathe and thermal effects. And so these people back then thought that our genes were stable, and they wanted to protect the population, the human population's genome, and they thought that any exposure to radiation was going to degrade the human species. And so they were trying to protect it, and so they wanted to minimize radiation exposures. And when they saw that radiation damaged fruit flies, well, they assumed that it was all harmful and it was linear with dose, the damage, and they didn't appreciate that there was repair or improvement happening. But what we found is that there's a high natural rate, and we have very powerful defenses that protect our DNA from the natural occurrence of damage. And the effect of radiation was interesting. The radiation itself didn't cause too many, relatively speaking, to the spontaneous damage rate, low dose background type radiation didn't cause, it was millions of times less a rate than was happening naturally just from oxygen and thermal effects. So the hazard from radiation was millions of times lower than the damage that was being caused by natural effects on our DNA. The interesting thing that we've discovered is that low doses of radiation are stimulatory. They stimulate these defenses that are repairing the DNA damage. And so a low dose of radiation actually increased the repair rate, increased the antioxidant production, increased the damaged cell removal rate. And so it was a beneficial effect. It actually reduced the incidence of cancer. Of course, high dose of radiation had the opposite effect. They inhibited the defenses, repair, and the protection. And so you did get a higher incidence with high dose of radiation. So there really was no basis for creating a fear for low doses, only the high doses that we knew about 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So what has happened is a political decision, a political change in which they created this scare to stop the bomb testing. And we're now, years later, not producing bombs. There was no arms race going on between Russia and the US. But we're now denied the benefit of radiation because people have created this fear, and it's difficult to get x-rays done, to get CT scans, diagnostic scans, and even treatments with low-dose radiation to cure infections or to stop cancer. So then this was one medical issue that was caused by the fear. The other one is when there's an accident occurs in a nuclear plant, there's radioactivity released, and the people go into this paralysis, this psychosis of fear, when really the amount of radioactivity released is not much different than what's there in nature. And so people are evacuated from their homes. For example, in Fukushima in Japan, 90,000 people were evacuated for, well, it's over a year now. Most of them are still away from their homes. And Japan has shut down all their reactors. They have about 50 of them. They had to import $55 billion worth of oil extra last year just because these plants were not running from March until the end of December. So it was a huge economic hit that Japan got from this. And the people are afraid, the children are afraid, everyone's afraid. And of course, it affects the nuclear profession, nuclear industry all over the world. Germany has stopped their nuclear program. They're not going to build anymore. They're going to shut down their plants. And the irony is the low doses that they were running away from were actually beneficial. They were improving the defenses that are protecting the DNA in our bodies. So it's a tragedy that we don't inform people. We're caught up with a mindset that came about from this political activity that was carried out years ago. And we can't use radiation for better diagnostics. We're using it, but people are always afraid. And some of them refuse to take it. And even the physicians, the radiologists say, well, we have to balance the benefit against the risk. And the irony is that there's no risk. There's only benefit. And so how do you communicate this message of the reality of the health effect? And so that was the purpose of my talk here at this conference, was to share with the people, the participants here, the history of our experience with radiation, high dose and low dose, over the last 100 years, to explain to them the evidence that low dose is not harmful, it's beneficial, it's stimulatory. It's like hormesis for chemicals. It's the same with radiation. It's biphasic. Low doses are stimulatory, high doses are inhibitory, they're harmful. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.